Another question that our audience had. This one is actually from just a discussion I've had with a few people. Um, the idea is like the concept of sales matchback, right? Some of these people have asked us how how do you perform sales matchback, and is it useful to the smaller and medium-sized businesses, or is it something that's really just meant for the much larger brands? Okay, so for the people who don't know what sales matchback is, the idea is that when you run a marketing campaign or you run any kind of campaigns and promote the awareness of your brand or your product or your services, very likely someone will take notice, or hopefully people will take notice of your marketing efforts, and they might be further down the sales funnel, and they might come to your business and actually make a purchase. So how do you know if that person made a purchase? Because of a marketing campaign that you run, right? So sales matchback kind of is supposed to help close the loop on that, so that you know that for that specific purchase, it was related to a particular campaign you run. By knowing that information, you can get more clarity into the efficacy of your marketing campaigns. So that's the right idea around sales matchback. I think we've seen a lot of companies where they'll run their marketing campaigns, but they don't know if people made a purchase because of the marketing campaigns. So that's the idea. So, Eunice, maybe you might have some thoughts on that. Is sales matchback something that is, exclusive to much larger brands that can afford to perform that kind of exercise?
I think it's still something that smaller brands could look into doing, because, like you said, it's very difficult to understand whether the sale actually came from some marketing campaign they had or not. So that's kind of pretty much the only other way to do it. The other way could possibly be you have a time period when you don't have any marketing campaigns and use that as your benchmark. And then once you have a marketing campaign, see if there's any kind of lift. And so that would be your variable that you could kind of guesstimate on. But doing a sales matchback would be much more accurate than doing the benchmarking campaign kind of way. But then in terms of like effort required, it really depends on how much effort it is per that brand, because the effort required to do that is really based off of what data that they have to even be able to do that. If they don't have a clean data to do that, it could take a lot of effort. And so if you're going to only match back to like a handful of people, then the effort there could be too great for that. So I think it's still something that smaller brands could look into doing, but it also depends on their data integration, their data that they have available, and then the time that it would take to do so.
Would you feel comfortable explaining just a very simple tactic that you've seen possibly that could be useful to smaller companies to perform a sales matchback? Something that's not very intensive for them to perform that kind of exercise.
I think even having that benchmark tactic where you have like a time period, like say a month where you don't have any marketing campaigns, use that as your benchmark, see what your sales are at that time. And then afterwards have another time period when you do have the marketing campaign and see if there's any sales lift. Obviously there could be some other things too, like seasonality, that you would have to factor in, but that could also be another gauge of what your sales would be or would not be with the marketing campaign.
And that's the simplest way of doing it in a way, in the sense, especially with channels that you cannot measure things on an individual basis. So for example, you're going out with an investment in, let's say, radio, where you can't necessarily kind of track who exactly heard a specific broadcast, where then you're looking at the period of investment versus no investment, and then kind of attributing it on a really high level time scale. So like what big brands do on a huge scale is something called, like, on a longer time period, is something called marketing mix modeling. It's just it's a separate stream of attribution, but it kind of does the same thing on a higher level. I would say an attribution or a sales matchback is much more beneficial for a small brand than for a large brand, because and I'm looking at it from a point of budget available. So small brands.
Pause you for a moment. You use the phrase like attribution. I think some of us might want a definition of what attribution means in this situation.
Okay, so attribution is basically similar to what you call a matchback. So basically, you're attributing a sale to a specific campaign or a marketing channel or an effort. So it's just a different word, but it's the same as a matchback. So a sales attribution, I would say, is more beneficial for a small brand because when you're working with a limited budget, you want to know that your marketing investment is bringing you short-term benefits. And in terms of ensuring, a lot of times big brands can invest in marketing efforts which are longer term strategies where you go after just building awareness, you go after building impressions. Longer term, you hope that your brand profile will grow. And in longer term, you hope that your brand will actually affect future sales, and you're eventually obtaining that market share. And that is something even if I were to go on a tangent to marketing mix models, like even marketing mix models are not great at identifying really long-term trends. So coming back to attribution models, there are easy ways to do it, and there are slightly more complex but more reliable way to do it. There are easier ways to do it in terms of like certain channels. You can easily do it with simplistic models, such as like let's say you're sending someone an email. They clicked on a specific campaign or a program that you sent, and within a couple of days, they made a purchase. If you have a test and control group, what you can do is you can have like a small 2% test segment who does not receive the campaign at all, and then whoever receive the control segment, you can attribute it to based on their actions, and then you can kind of verify what percentage did this marketing campaign contribute to. So for small brands, it would help them make fruitful investments in marketing than making big investments where they can't quantify if this is actually contributing to a real sale. So though that it sounds like a big word when you think of practically doing it, if you have good measurable data on an individual level specifically, it becomes a lot more easier. And I think a lot of times small brands tend to work with channel that can be tracked on an individual level. And you should try to maybe initially. So let's say you're going out with a direct mail campaign. Maybe try to have coupon codes there if it's easy to collect it at your store as well. So if you have coupon codes again or promotion codes, it's an easy way to do an individual attribution to see, okay, how many sales matchback you got, and as well as the revenue that's driven from it. So it would, and for big brands, it's usually much more harder to execute those. The information and things like that, and because of supply chain and logistics and everything that's associated with it. So small brands could possibly implement this easily and kind of put dollar value return on investment to everything that they do.
And the great thing about the coupon codes is that can be done both in a digital format or in a print format. So I think that's one of the benefits there. And it's almost like a default thing that anyone running those types of campaigns where they're giving discounts based on coupon code, you're going to have some kind of unique identifier to tie that sale or that use of that coupon back to a specific individual.
Yeah.
And I think actually it is, sales matchback would actually be good as well because you're collecting a lot of individual information that you can actually start marketing and personalizing towards that individual. So you would be a lot more direct as a small business and much more agile to talk to that individual user than a big company would. And then so you could actually make that one individual purchase much more and purchase more frequently and actually effectively increase their average transactions more than a bigger brand would be able to, because you're speaking to them at such a personal level, and it's much more easier to do at a smaller brand than a bigger brand.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful comment there. Yeah, any other thoughts around sales matchback?
No, I think it's a really interesting area in terms of the different attribution methodologies or matchback methodologies that are out there, because often we don't ask the consumer, is this exactly why you purchased something? Is it because you saw this campaign, right? And in terms of how marketing often works, they say you need to see brand communications multiple times. It's not just once. You kind of have to reach out to someone or kind of put your brand communication in front of them a specific amount of times for them to then decide to make a purchase. So it's a really interesting field in terms of different attribution methodologies, statistical methods in terms of how to attribute value to each position or of the campaign. For example, social may be a good channel for you to increase exposure, but it may not be the exact way that they make the exact channel that they make the final decision on. The final channel that they may make the decision on is probably another specific coupon, specific email, or a specific campaign that you send to them. So different channels have different positions in the whole sales journey. And these matchback models kind of help us understand what each channel does and where it all falls into play, and then kind of utilize each channels to specifically build that. So it's a really interesting area to be in.
Yeah, that's interesting because some of the people that I talk to, they have the impression that sales matchback is really just the most recent campaign. But that's not always the case, because sometimes it takes several communications, several engagement with your customers to build up that relationship with them before they make the actual purchase. So a sales matchback, yes, I mean, statistically, or if you're just for the purpose of reporting, you might tie it back to the most recent campaign. But if you really look closer at the numbers and the analytics, you'll see that you've been actually cultivating that relationship with your customer over a long period of time. And I guess that's a little bit part of the brand development, using data to help building your brand. Okay, so yeah, I mean, we can actually go on quite a long time talking about sales matchback. Maybe another episode we can do a little bit later on is speaking to certain models or certain practices that could be used for different sales matchback purposes. So that's something we can delve into at a later time. So any concluding remarks from any of you guys? No?
Good.
All right, okay, cool. So yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Okay.